The desert had no mercy. That much Jacob Klein had known since his first cattle drive west of Santa Fe, but knowing it didn't make him any less surprised when he hit the ground hard, ribs cracked, bleeding into the sand under a blazing sun with no water in sight. Bandits had taken everything: his horse, his gear, and nearly his life. Jacob's last memory before darkness took him was the sun's cruel eye bearing down from a sky without clouds, and the taste of blood in his mouth. He never expected to wake up, and certainly not like this. When consciousness returned, it came in soft layers: a cool cloth on his forehead, the murmur of voices, and the scent of cedar smoke. He blinked his eyes open. 3 women sat near the fire, each distinct, each watching him with quiet, wary eyes. The eldest, tall and sharp-eyed with silver strands in her braid, was the first to speak. "You should be dead." Her tone was not unkind, just matter-of-fact. Jacob tried to sit up and failed. Pain lanced through his side. "Feels like I might be," he muttered. The second woman, younger, her face painted with ochre and soot, poured water into a clay cup and brought it to his lips. Her hands were strong, but gentle. "Drink." He did, and it was like life pouring back into his bones. The third woman, smallest of the 3 but with the sharpest gaze, leaned forward. "You were left for the coyotes, but we found you." Jacob looked around. He was in a shaded dwelling, brush walls, a roof of hide and poles. Apache land. He had heard enough stories to know how it could have gone differently. "Why help me?" he croaked. The eldest woman crossed her arms. "Because fate brought you here, and perhaps we needed you as much as you needed saving." He didn't understand that at first, but in the days that followed, as his wounds healed and his strength returned, Jacob began to see. Their names were Naylin, the eldest and wisest; Sani, the fierce middle sister who rarely spoke without purpose; and Ioka, the youngest, who smiled the most. Though sadness never left her eyes, they lived alone, far from any tribe or settlement, in a hidden canyon guarded by stone and thorn. He gathered that they had left their people. Why? They didn't say at first. Each woman tended to him in different ways. Naylin taught him about herbs and healing. Sani watched his movements, training him with spear and bow as soon as he could stand. And Ioka sat beside him by the fire, asking questions he didn't know how to answer. "You were a husband once," she asked one night, her voice quiet as the embers popped. "I was," Jacob replied. "She died. Fever took her 2 winters ago." Ioka nodded. "We have lost 2. He wanted to ask more, but something in her tone told him not to push. As the weeks passed, Jacob became more than a guest. He helped with the hunting and mending, learned to read the clouds the way Sani did, and to brew cedar tea under Nalin's watchful eye. And Ioka, he started to laugh again with her. Really laugh. One evening, while preparing the fire, Naylin said, "You walk our land like a man with no past, and you look at my sisters like a man searching for a future." Jacob blinked, startled. "I didn't mean," she held up a hand. "It is not offense. It is truth. The spirits brought you here, but what you do now, that's on you." He had no answer for her. But when he looked at all 3 of them that night, their strength, their care, the way they moved as one, yet each carried her own storm, he knew something had shifted inside him. He had come west to leave his grief behind. Instead, he'd found something else, something unexpected. Love, maybe, or the beginning of it. The moon had risen high, casting silver light across the canyon, when Jacob woke from uneasy sleep. In the hush of the desert night, he could hear the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. But it was something else that stirred him, a feeling in his chest, as if something had changed in the air around him. He sat up slowly, careful of his ribs. They were nearly healed now, thanks to Nalin's herbs and Ioka's daily care. Even Sani, who hardly said a word at first, had taken to training him with a bow, though she never smiled when he hit his target. He stepped outside the brush shelter. The canyon stretched before him, glowing silver in the moonlight. Ioka was sitting by the fire, eyes on the stars. She looked up at him, not surprised. "You couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head, patting the space beside her. He joined her, wrapping a blanket over his shoulders. "I've never seen a sky like this," he said after a while. Ioka tilted her head. "It's always been here. You just had to come far enough to see it." He nodded. "I suppose I've been running too long." "From your wife?" Jacob hesitated. "Yes, from the life that ended with her. From the man I used to be." Ioka was quiet, then said, "You're not the only one who's lost." She didn't say more, but her silence carried the weight of something deep and old. Over the next few days, life returned to its rhythm, but Jacob noticed the small things now. The way Nayland muttered to the fire in her native tongue, like she was speaking to ancestors. The way Sandy lingered by the edge of the canyon each morning, her eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting someone, and the way Ioka smiled easily but never laughed out loud. They were women with stories, ones they hadn't told. And Jacob, he was beginning to feel like he was becoming part of their story. One afternoon, while he was gathering firewood, Sandy approached him. She carried her bow and a sharp glare, but her tone was different, thoughtful. "You are healing," she said. "I'm grateful for that." She nodded, then added, "It's time you knew the truth." He set the wood down slowly. "Truth about what?" "Why we saved you." That evening, around the fire, all three women sat with him. Nayland spoke first. "We were once part of a larger band, deep in the mountains, but war and betrayal scattered our people. We left not out of fear, but by choice. The three of us were tired of watching our kin fall to violence or be forced into reservations." Jacob listened carefully. He knew what the U.S. cavalry had done to the Apache, to the Dine, to so many others. He'd seen the broken trails and the burned villages. "We came here," Ioka said, "to live freely, even if it meant isolation. And we survived," Sandy added, "but something was missing." Nayland's eyes found Jacob's. "The spirits sent us dreams of a man who'd come wounded, broken, but with a heart like fire. Someone who could carry our bond forward." Jacob blinked. "Me, you," Nayland said, calm and clear. "We did not save you out of pity. We saved you because we were waiting." Ioka reached for his hand then, fingers warm against his rough skin. "You don't belong to the world you left behind, Jacob, but you might belong here." He looked at each of them, Nayland's wisdom, Sandy's fire, Ioka's heart, and realized he was no longer an outsider. He was being invited into something sacred, something rare. "You don't have to decide tonight," Nayland said, "but know this. The path forward is not one man with one woman. It is all of us, together." It was more than a proposal. It was a truth, laid bare. And Jacob, for the first time since his wife died, felt alive. Not just healed, but needed, maybe even loved. The days after their confession passed, like smoke on the wind, quiet but heavy with meaning. Jacob worked alongside the women in silence most mornings. Sandy taught him how to track wild hares through hard stone. Nayland sent him gathering herbs deep in the canyon. Ioka showed him where the wildflowers bloomed in late season. With every shared meal, every small word exchanged over the fire, the pull in his chest grew stronger, and yet, so did the weight of the past. One night, as the stars hung low and bright, Jacob stood at the edge of the canyon, staring into the black beyond. He hadn't spoken much since they told him the truth about the dreams, about what they believed he was meant to become. He heard soft footsteps behind him. It was Sandy. "Your thoughts are too loud," she said simply. Jacob gave a half-hearted chuckle. "That obvious, huh?" She came to stand beside him, arms crossed. "You're afraid. Of hurting you. Of choosing wrong. Of loving again?" Sandy turned her face to the wind. "You think you must love like you did before, like it's only one person, one road, one future. But you are not the same man, and we are not the same kind of women." He glanced at her, and she added, without flinching, "You are not being asked to replace the wife you lost. You are being offered something new. If your heart is not open to that, then you should leave before it becomes cruel." The truth in her words cut deep. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "You already care for us," she said. "We know. The question is, will you stay afraid of what comes next?" She left him there under the stars, and he didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he rode out alone. He needed to see something, to remember who he'd been before this hidden canyon swallowed him whole. The town of Dry Fork was a day's ride northeast, a place of dust and lawless chatter, where cowhands and merchants passed whiskey and stories that faded as quickly as they were told. When Jacob arrived, most didn't recognize him, thinner now, sun-darkened with sharper eyes. But the saloon keeper did. "Jacob Klein," the man said, surprised. "Heard you were dead. Bandits or fever?" they said. Jacob nodded slowly. "I was near dead." The barkeep poured him a drink. "What happened?" Jacob stared at the amber liquid. "I got found." Later, walking through the small main street, he passed familiar faces, but none that felt like home. The old general store, the livery, a church bell that hadn't rung since the winter flood. He stopped at the graveyard on the edge of town. There, beneath a twisted oak, lay a stone marker with a name he knew by heart. Clara Klein, beloved wife, may you rest in peace under open skies. He knelt beside it and placed a smooth canyon stone on top. "I loved you," he whispered. "I still do, but I'm still breathing and I think you'd want me to live." He stayed until dusk, then turned his horse back toward the canyon. Back toward them, they saw him coming from the ridge. 3 figures standing in stillness as the sun bled orange behind him. When he dismounted, the silence was thick. "I went to say goodbye," Jacob said. Ioka stepped forward, eyes wide. "To us." He shook his head. To her, Nayland's expression didn't change, but her shoulders lowered. "I don't know what this life is, or what it'll look like," Jacob said, "but I know that when I was lying in the dirt, dying, I didn't pray for a second chance to go back. I prayed for something new." He looked at each of them in turn, "And now it's standing in front of me." Then he added, softly, "If the offer still stands." Ioka smiled first. Sani stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. Nayland nodded. "You chose with your soul," Nayland said. "That's all we ever asked." As night fell, they stood together beneath a quiet sky, not bound by custom or law, but by something far older. A bond of choice, a bond of the heart. The canyon had become home. Jacob knew the trails now, the way the wind shifted at dusk, where the does drank before dawn, the places to avoid when the rains came fast and rough. He hunted, hauled water, split cedar, and learned how to read the language of the land, and of the women who had saved him. They lived together in harmony, not in the way townsfolk would understand, but in a rhythm older than fences or laws. Each night, the 4 of them shared the fire. Laughter came easier now. Touches lingered longer. And love, real, undeniable love, had rooted itself in the quiet moments between work and rest. But peace, like anything precious, was never left untouched for long. One afternoon, Jacob was fishing the shallow creek downstream when he heard hoofbeats fast, too fast to be friendly. By the time he reached the ridge, 2 riders were already at the canyon entrance, speaking loudly in broken Spanish and worse Apache. One was lean, with a cruel grin and a deputy's badge pinned to his chest. The other wore a preacher's collar. Nayland stood before them, firm as stone. "We have no quarrel with you," she said, voice steady. "You've got a white man living here," the deputy said, pointing toward the trail Jacob was now descending. "That's a crime in some counties." "He's not a prisoner," Ioka replied, stepping beside her sister. "He's free, and he chose us." The preacher scowled. "This is unnatural. He has been bewitched." Sani's hand hovered near her knife. "Careful, preacher." Jacob stepped between them before it escalated further. "These women saved my life," he said. "You've got no right to come here threatening them." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "You're a rancher, Klein. You had land, a reputation. Folks think you died, and maybe it was better that way." "I'm not going back," Jacob said firmly. "You think you can hide out here, living like some outlaw with 3 squaws?" The preacher spat. Jacob's jaw clenched. "Say that word again. I dare you." Nayland raised her hand. "No blood today." The deputy pointed a gloved finger. "You're making enemies, and they'll come louder than us." With that, the 2 men turned and rode out, the dust of their departure hanging heavy in the air. That night, the fire burned low and tense. "They'll return," Sani said, "with others. We've lived quietly for a reason," Nayland added. "We knew one day the outside world would come crashing through." Jacob stared into the flames. "Then we prepare. We stand our ground. Together." Ioka laid her hand gently over his. "They will call us wrong." He looked at her, truly looked. "And what do you call us?" She didn't hesitate. "Family." The word settled over them like a blessing and a burden. The next day, they buried their supplies deeper in the canyon and reinforced the trails with traps and warnings. Jacob rode out under cover of darkness to meet with a former scout he trusted, someone who owed him a favor. They needed information, time, options. The deputy's threats weren't idle. A posse could form in days. But Jacob had faced men like that before. What they didn't understand scared them. And what scared them? They tried to burn Dotso. They kept the fire going not just for warmth but as a signal, a reminder of who they were, and what they were building. The women taught Jacob the old war songs. In turn, he told them the stories of his youth, his time in Texas, the things he'd lost and the peace he'd only just found. Love, real love, is not born in grand gestures. It's built in the spaces between fear and hope, in the choice to stay, even when it's dangerous. And Jacob had made his choice. No preacher, no badge, no cowardly. Men with guns would tear it away. Not without a fight. The wind shifted the next morning. Sani smelled it first. Smoke. Faint and distant. Not wildfire, but campfire. Controlled. Intentional. "They're near," she said. Crouched on a rock overlooking the narrow pass leading into the canyon, Jacob joined her. peering through the spyglass he'd taken from the deputy's saddlebags the week before. He counted 6 riders, maybe more, all on sturdy horses, rifles slung carelessly across their backs. One of them wore the black coat of a preacher, another, the tin badge of the deputy from Dry Fork. They were less than 2 hours out. He lowered the spyglass and looked at Sanny. Time's up. They gathered quickly back at the shelter. Nalin laid out the plan. They wouldn't strike first, that wasn't their way, but they would defend their land with everything they had. The canyon was narrow, full of hidden turns and choke points. They knew every stone, every bluff. "We don't kill if we don't have to," she said, "but we make it clear we are not prey." Jacob checked the rifle he'd cleaned 3 times the night before. "I never thought I'd have to fight for the right to stay with the people I love." Ayoka touched his arm gently. "That's always been the fight." They set the traps, shallow pits covered with brush, high ledges stacked with loose stones ready to fall. Sanny took the ridge with her bow. Nalin, her old knife and a pouch of smoke herbs in hand, positioned herself in the central trail. Ayoka and Jacob held the narrowest path together, shoulder to shoulder. By noon, the hooves came, dust rose. The posse rounded the final bend and came to a hard stop when they saw Nalin standing in the center of the trail. Alone, the deputy reined his horse. "You're outnumbered." "Maybe," Nalin said, "but we're not outwitted." He smirked. "You had your warning." The preacher raised his voice. "That man is ours. You've bewitched him with your heathen ways. This is your final chance to release him." Nalin narrowed her eyes. "He is not ours. And we are not his. We are each our own, but we choose one another." They charged. But they didn't get far. The first horse hit a pit trap and toppled hard. Its rider screamed, rolling downhill. A second was met with a rain of stones from Sanny's position above. Chaos broke. The lead riders stumbled, trying to find cover. But the canyon had none to offer them. Jacob and Ayoka held their ground. A shot rang out, the deputy's rifle. It cracked past Jacob's shoulder. He aimed low and fired back, grazing the man's leg. The deputy fell, screaming, gun clattering down the rock. The preacher made it farther than the rest. He dismounted and stalked forward, Bible in one hand, pistol in the other. "Come with me, boy," he shouted at Jacob. "There's still a place for you in God's house." Jacob raised his rifle. God's house don't have room for hate. The preacher fired once wide, panicked. Then he dropped to the ground, coughing, clawing at his face. Nalin's smoke herbs had reached him. Sanny descended like a shadow, bow still drawn. The rest of the posse, those not wounded or trapped, turned and fled. They left their wounded behind, and the canyon fell silent again. By nightfall, the injured men had been bound and fed. Nalin insisted they be treated with dignity, though none had earned it. In the morning, they would be sent back to Dry Fork on foot, without their guns, with a message: "We are not afraid. We are not leaving." Jacob sat by the fire, arms wrapped around Ayoka as Sanny stitched a shallow cut on his arm. Nalin stirred the pot slowly, gaze far away. "They'll come again," Jacob said. "Let them," Sanny muttered, but Nalin added, "Next time it won't be a posse. It may be soldiers. Or worse. The world doesn't like what it doesn't understand." Jacob nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time the world learned. Their love wasn't a secret anymore, and it wasn't going anywhere. Not without a fight. The canyon was quiet again. Too quiet. The posse had limped away 2 days ago, their wounded patched, their pride more damaged than their bodies. And though no one said it out loud, they all knew that had only been the first wave. But fear didn't live here. Not anymore. Jacob sat beside the fire, sharpening his knife, listening to the steady rhythm of Nalin grinding dried herbs behind him. Ayoka hummed softly while she stirred a pot of stew. Sanny stood on the ridge, her silhouette outlined in the dusk, bow in hand, always watching. They were ready, not just for another fight, but for life, real life. That evening, they gathered on the high bluff overlooking the entire canyon, the place they had come to call home. The stars were just beginning to blink into the sky. Coyotes sang in the distance. The scent of juniper hung in the air. Jacob laid a woven blanket on the ground and sat. The others joined him one by one. No one spoke at first. Then Nalin said, "The spirits were right to bring you here." Jacob looked at her. "I don't know what I was meant for, but I know I don't want to go back. Not to the world where a man's heart is judged more than his deeds." "You're not going back," Ayoka said simply, fingers brushing his dot. Sanny shifted slightly. "We've all known pain. Loss. We came here to survive it. Now maybe we stay to build something new." Jacob nodded slowly. "But what kind of life? We can't live hiding in this canyon forever." Nayland stirred the coals of the fire with a stick. Then we make our presence known. Not with war. With work. With land. You mean ... farm? Jacob asked. She smirked. We've been doing that already. In pieces. Now we do it openly. We trade with the quiet folk. The ones who don't ask questions. You know people. Jacob, you used to move cattle. Fix fences. You can help build something better. He looked around at them. These women, so different in spirit, in strength, in voice, had become his entire world. And they had trusted him with theirs. Ioka said quietly, let the world see. Let them talk, but let them know love built this. Jacob stood. He pulled from his pocket a worn band of leather, braided from the strip he'd once wrapped around his rifle grip, the last thing from the life he left behind. He knelt before Nayland first. Wisdom is what led me here. He said, you saw me before I could even walk again. You guided me through every hard truth. If this life is to be built, it's because of your hands. He tied the band gently around her wrist. She nodded once, deeply. Then he turned to Sanny. Your fire kept me alive. Even when I doubted myself, you reminded me that a man can still fight, not just with guns, but with purpose. If this land stands, it will be because you protected it. He offered her a feather from the canyon hawk he'd hunted days earlier. She accepted it without a word, her eyes brighter than usual. Finally, he faced Ioka. You gave me laughter again. You reminded me I had more to give, more to feel. When I wanted to stay numb, you made me feel everything, and you made me want to live. He held her hand, gently lifting it to his chest. If I have a heart left to give, it's yours. She placed a carved stone in his palm, and mine is yours. That night, they didn't speak of threats or fear. They spoke of the future of children, of gardens, of trading posts and new paths. Jacob knew the world beyond the canyon might never understand their bond, but understanding wasn't required. Respect was in time. The name Klein Canyon would appear on trade maps. The story would spread, half legend and half truth, of a cowboy once broken, saved by 3 women who lived by their own law and who loved him fiercely, together. And when strangers asked Jacob how it all began, he'd always say the same thing. I didn't just find love, I found a new life. And every time he said it, the fire inside him would burn steady and strong, because this wasn't a life he fell into, it was the life he chose.